where things stand.
So Canada has to make some sort of decision by tomorrow, I understand, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And if they don't?
The clock ticks at midnight. If they don't, then basically there will be a deal that will go forward in text form to the Congress that is with Mexico as a bilateral deal, which, in fact, the president prefers bilateral deals anyway. But in this case, we'd love to have Canada in. If that happens, if we move forward with that, we'll certainly continue to talk with the Canadians. But the problem here, Neil, is that most of the big issues are solved with Canada. It's a great deal for all three countries in that it would make this hemisphere strong again from a manufacturing point of view. And it's a little puzzling why the Canadians are basically not coming to fruition on this. But we'll see. I mean, it's at the end of the day, Ambassador Robert Lighthizer is the best negotiator we've had at the USTR since it's been formed. The president's not going to do anything that is against the interests of the people, and we'll see what happens. But
are you worried, though, Peter, that it maybe as the tough talk ensues, and let's say there isn't a deal made with Canada by tomorrow, that it doesn't look good for obviously cobbling together something with China, and that American consumers who do pay the tariffs, it's not governments, are going to be looking at a pretty pricey Christmas shopping season?
I think, we need to put this in context. I think it's trust in Trump. I mean, this last week at the United Nations was historic in terms of trade. We settled and signed a deal with South Korea, which was a great move forward. We announced going forward with negotiations with Japan. We worked with Japan and the EU to basically issue statements condemning China's unfair trade practices and assault on their intellectual property. We're moving forward with discussions with countries like the UK. And in the meantime, on the 16th page of one of our newspapers, it was GDP growth over 4% reported in the data, which should have been a headline on the front page.
Oh, no, you're quite right about that. And then the economic performance is the wind, behind your back here, and it's providing the fuel to keep these talks going because we are the world economic engine, no doubting that. But are you worried, though, that this holiday season, American consumers could look at higher prices? Maybe they absorb that and they're perfectly happy to. Consumer confidence is at decades-long highs, so maybe you get through it. But are you worried about it?
So here's the lesson, Neil, of low prices, which are the creation of unfair trade practices, dumping by countries like China. Low prices have a high cost. It's lost factories, it's lost jobs, it's lost intellectual property and technology, and we cannot afford to lose any more of that. I think the stock market is accurately reflecting the fact that the tough trade actions that the president is taking has a very, very modest and negligible macroeconomic effect. And so, no, I'm not.
Well, they could also be assuming that cooler heads prevail and these things never come to pass. Do you think it's time, though, Peter, that the president reposition this argument? It might be a perfectly sound one to say this is the right thing for Americans to do and toughen up and realize that in the long term this will be a good thing, because he's pivoted slightly to make that argument. Do you recommend that he continue to make that this is part of a bigger cause than just getting something cheaper at Walmart?
Yeah, two things, Neil. Cooler heads are prevailing here. Finally, cooler heads at the Trump administration are actually being tough on trade. But what you just said is a beautiful thing. That's exactly the point that we need at this point in time to take these measures so we can have a strong economy, a strong manufacturing base, rising wages, which really are critical to our middle class. And I think that that's the position we've taken all along here, that this is the time to take tough trade action.
Right.
And the wind at our back, Neil, is not the wind at our back. That's created by President Trump's economic and trade policy. So he's the guy that's behind all this.
All right, well, the cooler heads might prevail to your point. They're not prevailing in China. Are you surprised this is going on so long and they're digging in? They're not even remotely blinking.
Look, with respect to China, they're a sovereign nation. They will do what they will. Sure. I think it's unfortunate when the rest of the world is fully acknowledged that they steal our intellectual property, they engage in just rampant unfair trade practices, dumping. Very difficult to negotiate with China when they don't even admit they do those kinds of things. We'll see how this plays out, but there's broad bipartisan support in the media, across the cable news channels, that China is ripping us off, and this president is doing the right thing to take them on.
Everyone agrees with you on China. They have a harder time getting their arms around Canada. Do you think that this is so dispersed among so many countries that you'd be better off making China the villain, which indeed on a lot of these trade issues they are, Peter, and not all these other countries?
I think, Neil, on that point, Nafta was a tremendous, tremendous harm to this country. And the president, as a candidate, promised that he would get a much better deal. He's got a much better deal already working with Mexico. Right. It will turn us into a manufacturing powerhouse. It's really up to Canada to see if they want to belly up to the bar here. If they do that, it'll be a great thing. If they don't, it'll be fine. We'll move forward. We'll keep talking to them.
All right. Thank you, Peter, very, very much.